moving right along, we are now going to be focusing on integrating our serverless MongoDB API written in Node.js with our React front-end application. So hopefully now we're going to have a little bit of an improvement in our audio. I decided to trust the native MacBook speakers, and I think they're going to do pretty well for me. The Beats headphones microphone is less than ideal. We'll put it that way. Anyway, so we've already configured Amplify using the amplify.configure function here, right? And AWS Mobile from AWS exports, as you can remember, is the file that is automatically generated by AWS Amplify. So, however, that serverless API that we deployed, this wasn't created using AWS Amplify. This was created using the serverless framework and deployed to AWS using it. Its name is Pareto. So the question is, how are we going to integrate this API into our front end? Well, thankfully, Amplify gives us all the tools that we need to be able to accomplish this. So let's go back to our index.js, and we can actually import the API module from AWS Amplify, and we could do api.configure, and similar to the boilerplate below where it says endpoints colon an array of objects, each of them having their own name, their own actual endpoints, as well as the region. Right, so we could probably delete this. This is not really necessary anymore, and this is also not necessary since we have our new user pool, and we're not really using S3 right now either, so let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. So the endpoint, well, the endpoint is this link here as given to us /prod by the serverless framework. So the endpoint is really just, it's a server, it's a website that's listening for HTTP requests. So we can go ahead and put that right there. Now, this is obviously not the ideal way, we'll put it, of storing our values, right? Like, you know, ideally we have some sort of a config file, because here, this is the /prod API, but you know, we want to be able to, what if we want to test our dev environment? So this is why people use environment variables, and it's why here we have a config file, which is going to help us take care of some of this dirty work. So let's go into our config. Let's see, I believe it was in our, here it is. And so here we're going to change this to US-East-1, and we're going to go ahead and change this to this. And we don't really need this anymore because we are now setting up Cognito through, we're setting up Cognito through our Amplify CLI. So we're going to change this to Mongo. Okay, alrighty, well then let's go ahead and we're importing config, and we're going to make the endpoint config dot dev dot mongo dot URL. I believe, was it URL? Capital URL, and we also need to remove that. let's go ahead and get rid of that. And then here we'll be able to replace this with config.dev.mongo.region. Okay. So cannot read property Mongo of undefined. Oh, you know what? We actually don't even need to specify dev here. But what we do need to do is we need to specify what environment we're currently in. We are in dev. Okay, so there we go. So because the config file here is exporting an object based on what the stage it is. So if the stage in our environment variable react_app_stage is prod, then config object is equal to prod here. However, since it's not prod, it's dev, the config object that we're exporting is here. Anyway, let's go ahead and I'm repositioning computer here onto a stand. It's heating up a little bit. So here, you know, it looks like it probably should work, but there's a really easy way to test this, right? So the easiest way for us to test this is to go into our app.js here, and let's add something into our component did mount function here. Let's go ahead. And await constant users equals await api.get. We've got to name the name of the service Pareto as well as the route users. And this API request should fetch a list of all of our users. Pretty simple, right? So let's run that and let's see if that is going to be successful. Well, now we have a list of users, so there we go. So it looks like this was successfully attached. We've successfully linked our APIs together. So now the question becomes, can we now create a new user profile? So looking here again, we have handle create profile. So why don't we go ahead and create a loggable object that we can check in case something goes wrong. And why don't we go ahead and test this business logic that we wrote in our last video here. Right. It's still pushing us there. Okay, so we have first name, last name. But you know what? Before we even do that, we could run something even a little simpler where we could console log the user object, console log the apprenticeship object, and console log the product object, just to check that things are working. So Michael, Litchev, Kyle 28, Kirkland, USA. Okay, so we have all of those three objects that were logged. So we have this, right? Incomplete, false, false, false. Okay, so it doesn't look like anything is missing here, right? And this has an ID, and then this member ID is doing that. We have our apprenticeship ID here, and we have our product ID, which is great. So it looks like this is ready to go. So let's go ahead and run this bad boy. And let's actually see if we can successfully create our user. Interesting. So some things were created here, but obviously nothing that we wanted. So perhaps it's because we had these extra brackets here. You know, I'm not quite sure those were necessary, to be completely honest. So why don't we just run that back real quick? Not parentheses, sorry, brackets. Okay. So we had one of them work, seemingly. So we created this account, and we created this apprenticeship account, but we didn't create the product account. Now that is interesting. It just says that it's null. So let's take a look-see here and see what we have. So product ID 2000, this.props.username. Let's put it side by side here. This.props.username. Type approved. Title description. GitHub. Right. So we're gonna go ahead and run that again, but before we do, we should probably go and delete that profile that was just created. So why don't we go into Postman, and this will be a good time to learn a little bit more about how to query about how to query APIs using something like Postman. So let's see here. Let's move this over here. So we're gonna send a GET request over here. See what we get. All right, cool. We got some stuff. But we want to find the one that we just made. And that one is going to be, I believe, is that? B24? Yes, it is. Okay, great. And so the way that we configured our delete function is pretty simple. All we have to do is do that. Doesn't get much easier than that, huh? Anyway, what we want to do now is we want to put that on pause, and we want to run this again, because obviously something happened here. First off, though, Pareto economist's last name. What was his brother's last name? Vilfredo Pareto. All right, Wilfredo Pareto. We'll just put my username here. Put Kirkland, USA. Okay. So what do we got here? We have, because one of these worked, obviously, right? We had the apprenticeship work, but the other one did not. So both have an achievements and approved, both have a description, both have an ID, both have a member ID, both have a title and a type with an XP of 2000, which isn't technically right, but the XP earned is 0, and each of them have as 1 through 15. Right. Now, I want to say the apprenticeship actually has 3000 XP, but I mean, it looks like it's correct. It looks like it should be correct. That's the thing that confuses me. So the body is the user, the body, oh, wait. Right, so the body is the user, and then apprenticeship in product. So user, apprenticeship, product. Oh, that's why. Huh. Because I've had a I've used the same name multiple times. So that's why that didn't work. So what happened was I tried to use product. I named the result of this API request product, even though there was already an object called product that was named. So no wonder that didn't work. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this out again. Wow. We have that one successfully. Okay, well, there we go. So it looks like all 3 of these requests completed successfully. Huzzah! Okay, so now, okay, so that's good. And so now we can uncomment that so that in the future it'll just go ahead and push us out of here, right? Instead of this changing thing here. Okay, so this is good. So that successfully took place. So now that that did take place, let's go ahead and check to make sure that we can actually access that data. So let's go back to our app.js, and we're going to have to create constant user equals await api.get. Inside the Pareto service, we're going to go to /users/ the ID. So we're going to have to make this an interpolated string here, because we're going to plug in a JavaScript variable. We're going to take the username and we're going to console log that user to check that it in fact exists. Let's see what we got here. Well, I saw something load. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Okay, well there we go. So we're getting all that, and then we also want to get the apprenticeship ID, right? So then let's also go ahead and let's go constant apprenticeship equals await API.get Pareto / experience. Oh, I gotta make this a interpolated string here. / experience / user dot apprenticeship ID. Got console log that apprenticeship. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the product to check that we can in fact access everything. Dot product ID. Great. Alrighty. Oh, apprenticeship not defined. Oh, that is because I misspelled it. Really gotta do something about these red messages because they're just annoying as hell. So app dot, so that's getting that. It's picking it up. Oh, so we're wondering why those second few API requests didn't work. Well, the issue here is that, so as you can see, when we're getting our initial user object here on line 26, when we're logging line 25, we're seeing that the first object in the array of objects is the actual user ID. So what's happening here is MongoDB is returning an array of objects, but our object is the first one. That's why what we need to do here is we need to take the first of the user object array. So basically in the array of objects here on line 26, we only care about the first element, the 0 element. So that's what we're doing here, is we're now accessing the 0 element of all the user objects, of which there's only one, and we're accessing the apprenticeship ID and product ID inside the first one. So now I am pretty sure that we're going to have better results. Okay, all right, there we go. So we have the apprenticeship and we have the product. Okay, very cool, very groovy. Okay, all right. So now what do we need to do? Well, what we need to do is we need to set the state. We need to pass these we need to pass this information down through child props. So here what we'll do is we're going to pass down user objects. Which is going to start out as an empty object. We're going to pass down an apprenticeship state object and a product state object. And what we're going to do is we're going to this.set state. We're going to set the state of these objects, which initially start out as these empty objects. We're going to set them to be user : user 0, apprenticeship : apprenticeship 0, and product : product 0. Interesting. So, oh, that's why. Okay, and now we want to pass those down through child props. So we're going to go ahead and pass down user as this.state.user. We're going to pass down product colon this.state.product. And we're going to pass down, we'll pass down, instead of calling it apprenticeship, we're going to call it training. So anyway, now that we have that, let's go ahead and go to our let's go to our dashboard, right? And home.js, let's see here. So what we need to do is really we just need to pass down all the props into the dashboard. This down props. Okay, so now let's go to dashboard and let's go ahead and console log this dot props and let's see what we get here. So we have the history, which lets us go to different parts of the URL. We have the location, which we'll talk about. Location is basically the actual URL itself. We have the product here, right? We have the training and we have the user. Excellent. So why don't we go ahead and run for this.props.user.firstName. Oh, could it be that we actually need to just call it fname? That's very possible. Well, there we go. So we're able to have our initial data populated inside of our central store, which is our app.js store. And from the central store, we're going to send out this data throughout the rest of our application as props using the magic of React Router. Very nice. Okay. So this is good. So we've gone ahead and we've integrated the API so we can get the data for it. And we can also post the data so we can create our user profile and we can then retrieve it and send that data down throughout the rest of our application so that it's accessible everywhere. Very cool. Okay. So let's review our project here. How are we doing here? So we have a profile system, right? Right now we have no way on the web application. We need to, 1, tie in the API, configure with API. Okay, so this has been done. 3, we can now create a user profile as well as query it based on our user ID. 4, we should be able to edit the profile. Well, actually, we'll actually make that its own separate ticket. So these 3 requirements have been met, and so we're going to go ahead and close. But what we are going to do is we're going to add another ticket here. We're going to get a little bit more granular with what we want to be doing. Edit profile functionality. So we want to specify exactly what it is that we want to do. So right now we can create a profile, but we can't edit it. We should be able to reuse the create profile, or the profile forms component, so that the business logic that it executes changes based on whether or not the user is creating a new profile or editing an existing one. I'll go ahead and assign this here. So that's going to be something that we'll come back to later. Let's see. And so we have the experience system. So, right. So we actually have some of this going. So we are showing the, so we are showing other information. Done. Right, so this, number 3, this is the main outstanding thing that we're going to be working on in the next video, which is to be able to associate the experience requirements from the Sanity API to that individual user's experience modules, and be able to mark items as completed, update the user's table, and then refresh the UI so that the user knows that the changes have been successfully modified. So let's see, we have the experience system, continuous integration, and then so we have the edit profile functionality, and then we also want to make a simple profile module on dashboard. We want to display the user's information, including GitHub profile picture, on their dashboard. Or do we? Or do we even want to do that? You know what? What we're going to do is we're going to make a profile directory instead. Because we're going to display the user, we're going to just naturally display some of the user's information on the dashboard, because we're going to have to display how many achievements they've completed, their total experience. You know, we'll have a welcome Michael message to help the users feel more at home. But what we really want is we want a profile directory. We want our members to be able to see who else is participating in the, we want our members to be able to see who else is participating in the Pareto program, and to be able to communicate with each other using AWS Amplify's chat room components. Hopefully they are written for React Web and not native. So that's another aspect of the product that we're going to integrate, is we're going to integrate AWS Amplify's chat room components. But so yeah, so that is what's on the horizon. But for the next episode, we are going to focus on the experience system and focus on implementing that so that a user can actually see the progress that they are making inside of the inside of the platform.